Have you guys ever posted something on social media that's like a totally normal photo, but you realize it's getting like a ton more attention than usual? No? There's never like an average picture that you post where you're like, oh wow, I don't usually get this many likes, but I'm getting a lot more likes. It happens to some people. Just play along. So sometimes when this happens, you get like really caught up in it, right? So you start checking your phone a whole bunch more than usual. You're like seeing how many likes it's at, how many comments you have, like craving more and more of it. If you're Chris Nelson, you're like screenshotting it and sending it to your friends every hour so they know how cool you are. This happens every once in a while, and you get a little bit caught up in it. But then have you ever noticed how quickly afterwards you're just like, that's it? Like, is that all there was? And you're either like craving like, oh, I need more. I have to post something else. I need more of that attention. Or you're just like, is that all it is? Or is there anything else? When you were younger and somebody would ask you the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Raise your hand if you either said famous or like something that you knew would make you super rich. When you were younger and someone would ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Raise your hand if you either said famous or something that you knew would make you really rich. So last year there was a survey. Focus, guys. Last year there was a survey where they asked 1,000 6 to 17-year-olds, what do you want to be when you grow up? And over 1/3 of these people said influencer. And the most popular answer was actually a YouTuber. And so I want to show you guys a picture of this kid named Ryan. This is Ryan. Shh, calm down, guys. Shh. Ryan plays with toys on YouTube, and last year he made $22 million off of YouTube. Yeah. After I heard that, I was like, I could be a YouTuber. I wouldn't mind that. But I get worried that we've like monopolized this idea of influencer to being something that only happens online. It only happens if you have several thousand followers or brand deals or scholarships, or you're getting paid a bunch of money from people through social media or having your own TV show or whatever it is. And it worries me because influence is so much larger than that. In fact, I believe your most important influence happens when you put your phone away and you have influence on the relationships around you and what's going on around you. And the reality that I hope that you take away today is that we all have influence. So I texted you guys and asked what you think an influencer is, and here's what you said. Somebody said Elon Musk. Someone said a parent. Someone said a YouTuber. Jake Paul, hold on the video. A person who influences, duh, is something someone said. Bad Instagram comedians. Someone who is Instagram famous. Someone said Gabe next president, so that's exciting. Someone said a person that has a social media following, and then someone said, I don't even know, but you can tell me. So I actually went around to our staff last week and asked them the same question, and so here's a video of what their response was.
I think that's a hard question because I think the world would say probably that an influencer is somebody who has a platform on social media. So probably an influencer for me would be somebody that I think has a voice that speaks truth that I would like to hear more from.
Someone who is able to get people to act or behave in a certain way that modifies their thoughts or their behaviors.
From a social standpoint, I think people who influence. No, people who have pull, people who have, for lack of a better word, power, whether that's money or social standing or jobs. Anybody that's famous or infamous, I think, can be an influencer.
I would say that someone who like guides or inspires others, or maybe like piques their interest in something.
I would define an influencer as somebody who has like a large amount of effect on those around them.
Influencer is someone that has an impact in your life.
I think an influencer is someone who causes someone to live differently in some way. And so that could be something really small and seemingly insignificant, like what music I'm going to listen to or what movie I'm going to go watch. Somebody influences me to do that, or it could be something big like how I live my life, for God, or the choices and decisions I make. So somebody that makes you live differently is an influencer.
Influencer. Somebody who has influence on someone else. No, they're somebody who kind of leads, I guess, to a degree, someone else to do something or to purchase something or to get something.
I think it would be someone who changes me somehow, maybe changes my mind about something or changes my attitude about something.
An influencer is someone whom other people pattern their behavior off of, whether for good or for bad.
I see an influencer in how our culture describes an influencer on someone online that gathers followers around them to be inspired about something.
Someone who has an impact on a certain subject. I'm assuming so like a YouTube influencer, someone who uses their platform to inform people about like whatever they're talking about. When it comes to like music, maybe they're influencing you that this guitar is good or this guitar is bad. And so someone who has influence. I can't say influence. Someone who informs in a certain subject, I would say.
So I actually really loved Carla Lowe's answer. She's one of our children's ministers. I cut some of it just for the sake of the timing of the video, but she talked about how she thinks that the world would define influencer as somebody who has more than like a few thousand followers on Instagram and has all these brand deals and whatever. She said to her generation, that doesn't really mean much, that she would describe an influencer as somebody who has the ability to inspire someone to change the way that they're behaving, and those sorts of things. And that's pretty much exactly what I want to talk about tonight. Because the truth is that everyone has influence. Whether you're someone's child or someone's sibling or someone's friend or someone's student or someone's teammate, everyone has influence. You're an influencer. The person next to you is an influencer. We all have influence. And God has placed you and positioned you in certain areas of your life to give you influence. And this isn't for someday or when you're older or when you're working a certain job or when you have more followers. This is for you today, right now. Shh, 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 shh. He's given you a family. He's given you a school. He's given you a team. He's placed you in a neighborhood. He has given you influence in the lives of those around you. And when we think of influence, I think we often think of why we're not influencers, what we don't have. We start to think, I don't have the position or the status or the money. I'm too young. I'm not smart enough. But who's the most influential person that's ever lived? Exactly. And that's not just the answer because we're in church. It is Jesus. Even historians who don't believe that Jesus is God will still say that he was the most dominant figure in all of civilization and that he's completely changed history. And have you ever thought about what Jesus didn't have? Jesus didn't have a book deal, but a lot of books have been sold in his name. He never traveled more than 200 miles away from his hometown. He never had a servant or a slave, but many people called him master. He never had a formal education or degree, but many people called him teacher. He never handed out medicine, but many called him healer. He never had an army, but kings feared him. And he never won military battles, but he saved the world. There was much that Jesus didn't have in terms of resources and power, but he lived a life like this world has never seen. He loved like this world has never known. He spoke truth with such grace, and he changed the world. And so when we're thinking, how do I have influence in my life? We should go to Jesus for that answer, because he lived the life of the most influence that the world has ever seen, and it lasted long after his death, even to this day. So I think great influence comes in a lot of different ways, but I think that the first one is that great influence comes through being a great servant. And so Matthew 20:17 through 28 says, "Now Jesus was going up to Jerusalem. On the way, he took the 12 aside and said to them, 'We are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day, he will be raised to life.'" So Jesus is walking with the disciples, and he huddles them up, and he goes, "I'm about to die," is essentially what he said. And he tells them details of when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And then he says, "But I'm going to come back to life." And so if you want to know who to be influenced by, it's probably the person who tells you the day that they're going to come back to life and makes good on that promise. But then if we continue reading, it says, "Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down asked a favor of him. 'What is it you want?' he asked. She said, 'Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom.'" So Jesus told them that he's going to die on the cross, and then the mother of James and John, two of the disciples, come to him and says, "Jesus, can I ask you a favor? Just that maybe my sons can have a little bit more influence and power and greatness and status." And I think it's kind of funny when I look at this that John is the only gospel that doesn't include this story, that Matthew, Mark, and Luke all decided to include this, and John was like, "Nah, I'm just not going to tell that part," because his mom was asking for something that was, kind of like, why would you ask when Jesus is about to die and is suffering? And so then it continues and says, "You don't know what you are asking," Jesus said to them. "Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" So in other words, can you receive the suffering that I'm about to receive? Because before someone is going to sit at my right or at my left, there's going to be people at my right and at my left on the cross. And so will you receive the suffering? You want the seats, but will you receive the suffering? So it says, "We can," they answered. Jesus said to them, "You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father." When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. So the rest of the disciples are kind of ticked off, and probably because they were like, "We kind of wanted to ask that question. We wanted the influence and the power, and we wanted to sit next to Jesus." And so Jesus sees that all of this is going on, and it says that Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you." And so Jesus is saying, you know how the leaders that we see that are not of the kingdom of God, the way that they lead, we don't do it like that. They lead with a spirit of superiority and like power mongering, but that's not us. There's a different way of leadership in the kingdom. So it continues and says, "Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." And so we can see in the disciples this desire for greatness. And here Jesus, he doesn't rebuke that desire. He doesn't say that they're wrong or that that's bad, but he just kind of redefines what influence looks like, what it looks like to live a great life. Because greatness is not being served. It's not about what we get out of it. Greatness is about serving others. And the one who is the greatest influence that the world has ever known is also the greatest servant that the world has ever seen. And he served to reveal the character and the nature and the heart of God. He was born a servant's birth, and he died a servant's death, and with everything in between, he lived the life of a servant. He served the marginalized, he served the oppressed, he served the diseased, those in poverty, those in captivity, those in bondage. He served the orphans and the widows. Jesus served his whole life. That's what his whole life looked like. And the cross was the ultimate revelation of what it looks like to serve. And so he gathered his disciples then, and he still gathers us now, and he says, if you want influence, it comes through serving. And so if we're going to grow in Christ-likeness, which is the goal for this influence, it's going to require serving. The next thing that I would say is that great influence comes through choosing our words carefully. When I was in high school at the church that I grew up at, there was this girl my age that just did not like me. And we kind of all have those people that we just don't click with, and like there's nothing that necessarily maybe happened, but it's just kind of like you don't gel and they just don't like you, or you just don't like them. And that was kind of the situation with this girl, and it weighed heavy on me because I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix it. She doesn't like me, and it seems like there's nothing I can do. And so we were at church one Sunday morning, and it was her and I, and then we had another friend there that was talking with us, and we just had this weird interaction. I don't even know now what it was. But she walked away, and I remember I turned to that mutual friend, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, this girl just does not like me, and I don't know why. And my friend says, I think I know why. And I was like, oh, okay. Why? And she says, I think it's your personality. And so, yeah, and so I'm like a little taken aback, right? She said, yeah, I think it's your personality. You're just like a lot. Yeah, and so her phone number, no, I'm just kidding. But you guys were mad, so I was like, oh, you can go yell at it. No, just kidding. But yeah, it just threw me off, and it really hurt. And part of the reason that I tell you this story is because I think we've all been both of these people, right? We've all experienced someone saying something, whether they had good intentions or not, and we've all been the one who accidentally, or not, said something that just broke someone's heart. Because I'll tell you what happened in that moment. What happened when this happened is that this story started in my head of, hey, you know all those other reasons you were thinking that this girl doesn't like you, or maybe some other people doesn't like you? Because I had a list, like we all can say reasons that people might not like us. I already had a list of things I thought I could change. But you know all those other reasons you thought? It's actually just who you are. And that's the story that started playing in my head. And I can't do much about being Jenny, right? I'm all about self-betterment and self-growing and smoothing out the sharp edges and becoming a better person, but we're kind of stuck with our personality. And I can change my clothes, but I can't fix my personality. And it felt like this girl was saying to me, hey, you're hard to love, and there's really nothing you can do about it. It's just who you are. And I was shocked. And I was devastated in kind of like the resigned kind of devastated way, where I was just like, oh, okay, cool. And I remember I just thought like something in me has shifted for good, or like for long term. And I was just shocked. And so I actually had plans already that I was going to go to my mentor's house after church. She came to church with me, but she didn't go that morning for whatever reason. And I remember when I got there, she was like, oh, how'd the morning go or whatever? And I was just kind of like, fine, And in my head, let me tell you, I promise you, I was thinking my whole life just changed. Everything about me and my future just changed. because it just felt like there's something wrong with me and there's nothing I can do about it and nobody's ever going to like me and I'm never going to get anywhere, and my whole life just changed because this girl was my friend and she's saying people don't like you just because of who you are. And so my mentor says, is everything okay? And I was like, yeah, actually, I need to tell you what just happened because I just need you to please tell me if it's true. Like, the kindest thing that you can do for me right now is just tell me if this is true. And so I tell her the whole story. And then when it's over, I remember she just kind of looked at me and she was like, tell me one more time, like kind of in like an angry mom type of way. So I was like, okay. And I tell her the story again. And she says, look at me. God did not make a mistake when he made you. She said that you have your life and who you are, your gifts, the personality that God has given you was not a mistake. And you have things to offer to people that nobody else has to offer. And she just continues to encourage me and speak these words of life over me. And that moment felt like it healed something in me. That moment with my friend before in the morning felt like my whole life had changed. And this moment felt like it healed me. The power of that second conversation changed me all over again. Her words changed me, and I'll never forget it. I still haven't. And so I think that we can be any of the people in this story. And how often are we choosing to be like my mentor? Of saying, let me tell you what's actually true. Let me take the power in me to use these words to tell you what is actually true about your story and about your life. Because that influences people, and that changes people, and I'll never forget it. Every time you use your words, it's not just a neutral move. It matters. It holds immense weight. Our words matter. And my prayer is that for all of us, that our words wouldn't be wasted, but that we would recognize the influence that they hold and how it can change other people's lives, and that we would choose to use our words the way that my mentor did in that story. And so another thing is that great influence also comes through being a second mile person. In Matthew 5:41, Jesus has a conversation with the disciples where he says, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go 2 miles. And so for context, in Jewish culture in Israel, they were under oppression by the Romans, and it was by law required that if a Roman soldier asked you to carry his heavy pack, which was about like 75 pounds, if he asked you to carry it for a mile, you were by law required to carry it for the whole mile. And on Roman roads, there were milestones so you could march it off and then figure out when you've reached a mile. And so Jesus is saying, if they asked you to carry it 1 mile, just go ahead and carry it 2 miles. Carry it that second mile. Because the first mile is expectation. It's requirement, it's obligation, it's law. But the second mile is where you get influence. The first mile is expectation, but when you go the second mile, you exceed expectation. And so imagine some 15-year-old Jewish boy walking along and some Roman soldier says, hey kid, carry this. And he gives him the pack and it weighs the kid down and he carries it for a mile. And at the end of the mile, what does the Roman soldier expect him to do? He expects him to drop the pack, right? But what does this little boy do? He says, hey, I'm going to carry it a second mile. And my guess is that that first mile, they probably didn't talk much. It was probably just this little boy was doing what he was supposed to do. But the second mile, I'm sure there were conversations happening. And I bet that the soldier would have been like, why are you doing this? And in the second mile, that boy gets to tell him about Jesus, his rabbi. And when we go the second mile, we get opportunities to glorify God and tell stories about Jesus. But that influence comes in the second mile. And so what would it look like for you if you went the second mile at school, if you went the second mile at home with your family, if you went the second mile on your team at practice, if you went the second mile with your friends, at work maybe if you have a job? What would it look like if you didn't just stop at expectation, but you went beyond? Because the second mile is where we gain influence. Great influence also comes when we are others focused. And so have you guys ever noticed that whenever someone takes a group picture that you're in and they hand you the phone and you're like, all right, let me see if it's a good picture. Who's the first person that you look at? You. Yeah, you look at you. We all do it, right? And they're asking like, hey, is it good? You want me to take it again? And you didn't even look at anybody else. They could have all been blinking. Somebody could have had a fly in their face. Maybe someone forgot to smile. But you're like, hey, I look good, so it's great, right? Because our default setting is to think of ourselves. We can walk into a room and we can be like, here I am. Or we can walk into a room and we can say, there you are. And we all know people like that, right? And I always think of how badly I want to be a person like that, a person who sees people, a person who just cares deeply about people. And when I think of people like this, my first thought is always Barbie Martinez. When she walks in a room, she is always saying, there you are. And it's astounding and inspiring the way that she sees people and that she focuses on others. I just love it. I love to just watch her on Sunday mornings. She's so good at it. And if anyone could have walked this earth saying, here I am, it would have been Jesus, right? Because he actually was the I am. But time and time again, Jesus walked around saying, there you are, and there you are, and there you are. And as followers of Jesus, we should be striving to be the same way, to focus on others, to see others, to care about others, to know that they're there. And so going along with that, I think that great influence comes when we stay broken. And I think that culture has often caused us to feel like we need to look like we always kind of have it all together, right? But influence comes through a brokenness and a vulnerability. It comes when our weaknesses are offered to God. And my mom reminded me the other day that Jesus wept when Lazarus died, even though he knew that he was going to resurrect him. And I think that sometimes we think that even Jesus, he probably just had it all together, but we see right there he didn't. He cried with those who were crying. He hurt with those who were hurting. The things that broke God's heart broke Jesus' heart, and they should break ours too. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I think I just get so focused on my agenda and the things that I need to get done during the day and the things that I want to accomplish that I just kind of forget. And my heart isn't broken for what breaks God's heart. But I want my heart to stay broken for other people. I want to sit and be broken with my friend who's struggling with anxiety. I want to sit and cry and be broken with my friend who just lost her sister. I want to sit and be broken with my friend who's suffering. I want to sit and be broken with the homeless person on the street who doesn't know where their next meal is going to come from. I want to sit and be broken with the person who is struggling. I want to sit and be broken with the person who's hurting. I want my heart to stay broken for what absolutely breaks God's heart. And so is your heart broken for others? Brokenness is where we gain influence, where God meets us and we have a chance to pour out his love on others. And I don't know about you guys, but it's so easy for me to get so swept up in my desire for influence and for greatness and for accolades and for attention that I forget what it really looks like. I forget what Jesus modeled, that he did show us what this looks like. I forget how Jesus lived. And so as the band comes up on stage, I just want to encourage you guys what Jesus lived like. He lived a life that was broken for those who were broken, a life that was completely focused on others, a life where he was careful with his words and he used them to build others up and to encourage others. And he knew what those words meant, and he knew that words changed lives. This is how Jesus lived. This is how he gained influence that changed the whole world, that still changes us today. And this is how we can have influence too. Let's pray.